Hello and good day to you. My name is Nate. This is Limping Through Models, and we are on the sixth and final part of the Chicken Salad Challenge. Today we finished the tornado. So with all that in mind, let's get started. Since the last time we gathered on this project, I added beads to the sign. I had a nice overhead video and everything for this, but unfortunately I lost it. It's been almost a year since I did anything with this model, so there were some things I needed to fix, including the fence. I start by sanding down the edge to give a flat surface and use the non-FDA cleared super glue to fence it in place. It was not quite right, so I take an X-Acto knife to shave it down. Be sure when you do this to cut away from yourself so you do not cause a, well, accident. Some of the fence popped off at some point and I could not find it. Thankfully, I had some extra I could use to replace what was missing. I decided to attach the sign at this point too. It is now time to throw on some new embellishments, starting with the center plate of the gondola. I have my googly eye shell that I painted eons ago that I stick to the mat with some putty. I then start to lay out a light pattern loosely based on what I'd seen in pictures. While that dries, I do some touch-up on the edges I roughed up when reapplying the fences. While I was at it, I reinforced other fences with super glue as well. The roof of the ticket booth is now glued into place, and I start to prepare that for some priming, in addition to the googly eyes I will use for the two signposts. Hey look, the center plate is on. Oh, and the parts are primed too. I pull apart a clothespin and use the tips as a base to hold these googly eye signs in place while I paint them with no less than 3 coats of acrylic paint. Actually, probably more than that. The brush was getting me nowhere, so I decided to move to the sponge for better coverage and less time. Or what I think is less time. The sponging does give a rougher surface, giving the cheap paint something to grab onto. I bought these brass tubes to use on the post for the 2 signs at the front of the ride. Don't ask me why I chose to use these, I have no clue. They were hard to cut cleanly, required much touch-up after the fact, and looking at the prototype pictures, the real-life posts were square to begin with. I had scores of styrene strips that were both square and cylinder shaped that I could have used, but I guess I wanted to torture myself and ruin whatever good nippers I had in the tubing. Now on to the ticket booth, where I get to work on the decals. I had a good straight shot of the ride from Google that I used to make many of the embellishments of the ticket booth, including the baseboard of the booth. In addition to the baseboard, I scale out the mini tornado signs for the 2 additional signs at the front, the sign for the top of the ticket booth, and the side flourishes of the booth. After about 5 or so lost causes, I finally have a sheet with all the decals properly laid out and scaled, and I get to work on applying those decals. For the smaller decals, I cut out a square of styrene and applied the decals to that with the intention of cutting those out later. The light pattern for the edge of the booth at the top of the roof was going to be all gold, however it didn't pop like I had hoped. So I add some blue in between the previously laid gold beads to give it a little bit more variation. Safety first, as I use my son's scissors to cut out the pieces for the sign. I used the 1, 2, 3 blocks to create a 90-degree angle to fix the back support on the main and side signs. After attaching these to the roof, I give the inside of the booth a coat of black paint. I decided I didn't like the roof the way it was, so I carefully painted it a darker color too. I purchased a package of scale ladders to attach to the back platforms of the ride. I've seen this on my Faller breakdancer ride and wanted to do the same on this ride. After measuring out the length needed, I cut up 2 lengths of ladder and painted them. I also painted the post and back parts of the 2 front signs too. Using an old model package, I cut out some clear plastic for the ticket booth windows and attached them with the clear plastic cement I used for the beads. I find my old hole punch and punch out a few holes of styrene. I'm going to use these holes as a spacer for the tornado signs on the 2 front signs and for the light fixtures at the top of the ticket booth. I carefully lay out the pattern for the ticket booth fixtures and then attach the spacers to the signs. While these are drying, I attach the ladders to the back of the ride and the signposts to the sign. The ticket booth needed a shelf around its structure. To make this, I trace out the 5 outward sides of the structure. Like a big dummy, I cut out the tracing instead of marking outwards from the tracing. So I decided to use the tracing to trace another shelf and did the work to expand that to make a proper shelf. After some test fitting and sanding, I paint that shelf and add another coat of paint to the front signs as well. Guys, I think I figured it out. I figured out why I did the brass tube. I had this crazy idea that at some point, if I get good enough, i.e. take the time to learn, that I'd fish through some mini LEDs into those signs, but obviously I said to heck with it at some point, as I butted up those posts to the top edge of those signs, so there's no way that I'm hiding an LED with the wire sticking out the top like that. Regardless, I'm laying down another light pattern like a prototype photo, and I think it looks fine the way it is. I can always fudge the lights another way later. One other embellishment are these half backdrops that frame the ride on either side. I take measurements to create an obtuse triangle to match the shape of the prototype. I grab my super thick styrene and cut out the shape, snapping off what I can. Snapping the short end of the triangle was easy, but the long end, I had to give that a few good passes before I even attempted to try that. After grabbing a fresh number 11 blade, a couple more passes were made and it snapped just fine. The half backdrop looked great on the ride. However, the prototype had some additional lighted signs like the 2 out front that were attached at the top of these backdrops, and unfortunately what I cut out was too wide. I decided to thin the backdrop down by 5mm and cut out a similar pattern as before. I had the bright idea to use pliers to snap the long end of the triangle this time, and it took way less time than my first attempt. Back at the ticket booth, I noticed that with the shelf in place, the people would not have any way to get around the front of the booth with the fence in the way. I decided to cut out the back of the booth at the bottom to give room for the booth to sit further back on the plate. Once cut to where it needed to be, I glue it in place. The two front signs are also glued in place too, and some clamps are used to keep the post straight while drying. Off screen, i.e. in footage I lost, I sprayed a coat of nickel on the half backdrops and get to work on the 92 coats of acrylic paint needed for the front. While in between coats 36 and 37, I decided I did not like the rising mechanism of the ride. The way it was, even with the ticket booth partially obscuring it, looked kinda shoddy to me. I removed the pin and the broken hook piece from the ride and cut out a piece of styrene to lay in its place. I take the nickel spray paint and paint that styrene piece to match the rest of the platform, and use the rest to touch up parts of the half backdrops and other parts of the ride. My first half backdrop attempt was not going to waste. I had this crazy idea to use it as a replacement to the rising mechanism. This would need to stand upright under the ride, so I take the snapped off short ends of the current half backdrops and use those as footings for the larger piece. It would be static, but at least I'd be able to have the ride in its intended position when running the motor. The test fit looked great, but I needed a place for the prop to sit that would not interfere with the motor. I take some square styrene and create a little pocket in the place that I wanted the prop to land. I fashion a little box for that tip of the prop to sit in so it would not move. After another test fit, the prop was in the place that I wanted it, and it fit in the pocket just fine. Coat number 92 is on, and now I start on the light pattern. Unfortunately, that too is lost footage, and all you have is the end result. You've seen me lay enough beads as it is already. A neat little trick I picked up on some other modeling videos is the use of tissue paper to make tarp-like coverings. Alls I had was toilet paper, and I used that to make something to look like those vinyl curtains that you see on these traveling rides. I mix some white glue with water, and I start to lay the paper on, being sure to overlap the paper to simulate a vinyl curtain. I use metallic red paint to paint the vinyl curtains. Once painted, I attach the half backdrops to complete the ride. Finally, after all this time, the chicken salad is served. And here it is in all of its glory. The tornado, it is here, it is finished, and it looks immaculate. This is some delicious chicken salad, and if I really like chicken salad, I'd be eating this right now. But I'm not a fan of chicken salad. I don't get it. But nevertheless, I am happy with the results here. This is a vast improvement from what was, what would be if I just built this out of the box as is, with all the colors and the decals that came with it. But this is overall, I'm really happy with the results here. When you say that you're going to do something like a chicken salad challenge, there's a lot of pressure that you put on yourself to make something that actually looks good. And throughout the whole process of this build, I really feel like this is something that I did that looks good. And it really helps to build my confidence in model building and things like that. And so I'm really happy with the results and what I was able to accomplish here. So I'm glad that you came along for the ride. I'm glad that this is finally over. It was a little longer than I anticipated because, reasons, whatever. But here it is. It's done. It's finished. You're going to get some close-up shots. And, that's that. So with all that, like, comment, subscribe, do everything you have to do to get to the next video here on the channel. And until then, see you next time.